Mr Speaker.
I call Chris Farfoy.
Mr Speaker, it's an absolute pleasure to take the final call for Labour on the New Zealand Business Number Bill. And just to bring some of the arguments together that my colleagues have made during this final reading, I do want to address some of the comments made by the previous speaker and the fact that he believes his side of the House is not out of touch. Well, I think if you put together this piece of legislation and an earlier piece of legislation that we were debating around GST, I think you find that this government is increasingly out of touch with the likes of small to medium businesses. Because if you were a small business and you wanted the full effect of this piece of legislation, then you want to see the kinds of changes that were proffered by Dr David Clark and by Ria Bond from the New Zealand First Party put into this piece of legislation at the committee stage. It was not. If you were watching earlier at home around the GST taxation bill, you'd want to make sure that the tangible products that are being brought overseas would be tackled by this government and GST put on that. But this government isn't wanting to do that. It is not willing to support small business and to put GST on those. So this government is becoming increasingly out of touch with the likes of small to medium businesses. Mr Speaker, I think that the legislative process that we have in this House is a good one. We start with a first reading, and then through those various stages, a bill or a piece of legislation is meant to get better. It's meant to get better because at the Select Committee, the public and businesses and organisations and political parties can have input into that process to make changes that hopefully all parties in this House can agree to. So we get through the Select Committee stage into the second reading stage and the Committee of Whole House, where different parties and individual members can put forward changes, amendments, SOP, a supplementary order paper in parliamentary language, to make things better. But what we've got here is a piece of legislation that started out with great promise, but has actually got worse during the parliamentary process. Because the big question I want to ask is, what happened to Clause 34? What happened to Clause 34? It was there in the first reading, and it gave a mandate for all government departments to use and prioritise the New Zealand business number. But somewhere along the process, Clause 34 went missing. The government bottled out. It said, we want to back this New Zealand business number, so we're going to make all government departments use it. That was the essence of Clause 34, but that went mysteriously missing after the Select Committee process. Quite simple, because the government said, we want to do this, and then it realised, actually, we can't do this. We can't do it because we're not ready for this. So we're going to get ourselves, Mr Speaker, into a farcical situation where the government has introduced this New Zealand business number to make things more efficient for businesses out there, but we may have some businesses actually having to have two numbers, making things tougher and creating more red tape for businesses. So not only will they have to have probably an IRD number, which they'll deal with the IRD as per usual, but they may have to have an IRD number and a New Zealand business number as well. So the whole premise of this piece of legislation to go and having one individual identifier number for businesses could be out the door, because this government isn't backing itself, isn't backing those government departments, and isn't properly resourcing those government departments to make sure that this business number can be rolled out around all the relevant departments so it can actually be of use to small and medium businesses. Now, of course, I would say that because I'm biased. I'm on this side of the House. But hold on, the government was warned about this by the officials at the very beginning of the process. So don't take my word for it. I'll read from the opening page of the regulatory impact statement, last paragraph. A second issue for the success of the New Zealand business number, we all want that, you want that, we want that, we're going to vote for it, but I don't think it's going to happen, is ensuring that there is an efficient and rapid uptake of the number by businesses and state sector agencies. Sounds pretty common sense. If you're going to introduce a number, make sure that government departments use it and businesses use it. This is needed to build momentum for infrastructure development and private investment in commercial opportunities. And here we go. A potential conundrum arises if agencies, quote, wait for all businesses, and conversely, if businesses wait for the agencies. Without significant uptake, there is a risk that the identifier is not integrated and utilised widely, and just becomes another number, rather than a replacement for the many current identifiers as intended. Now, that's official speak, that's the advisors to the bill. In English, that is saying, if we don't get the government departments ready to use the number in an effective and broad enough manner so that enough businesses pick up the New Zealand business number, we think the New Zealand business number could be a waste of time, ineffective, and make things harder for the very people that we want to help.
Sounds like a Labour Party meeting.
You just keep eating your slops. It reminds me of the kind of legislation and the answers you give at question time. he's still smiling from the slops. You just keep eating your slops.
Back to the vote.
So, ineffective, just like that minister. Hopeless, just like that minister.
That's untrue.
And not willing to be rolled out.
Tell us about the 28.
We wish he was rolled out.
Tell us about the 28.
So this piece of legislation started with good intentions. We supported it and we thought it would get better during the process, but it's actually got worse. So a big message to those out there, those small business owners and medium business owners that this government says they're working for you, well, they started but didn't finish the job. So all that hard work that they said they were going to do for you to make your life easier, to save you money, could be absolutely ineffectual because this government bottled out. Again, where is clause 34? The very important clause 34, Mr.
It's not in the bill. We can only talk about those things.
Well, it's not there because they took it out.
Order. Order. We're on a third reading speech, and I have mentioned this previously. We're talking about what's been reported back from the Committee of the Whole back to the third reading. Now, ask members to concentrate on the content of a third reading speech and what's been reported back from the Committee of the Whole. And that also refers to amendments, and I gave a ruling on that earlier. Chris Farford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This bill could have been better if the government had taken on an SOP from Ria Bond and David Clark, which would have essentially reinserted a clause that was there at the beginning of the process but isn't there now, and would have put pressure on government departments to take this number up, to make sure that they were offering it to as many of the people that interact with those government departments so they could get the benefits of the number. And now the legislation that we've got now, Mr. Speaker, doesn't have that in it, and I think is weaker for it because now there is no mandate, no pressure on those government departments to say, look, the government has introduced this number, the pressure is on us to get people out there signed up so we can get the benefits of this. Quite good benefits were offered up at the very beginning of this legislative process. I think there was around $60 million benefit to people, individuals and businesses out there. That's not an insignificant amount of money that could have been redirected into giving people pay rises, because they haven't seen one of those for a while, creating some jobs, because that hasn't happened for a while. But no, we don't think that entire $60 million is going to be realised because the government has bottled out. So let me put this in very plain English for those people listening. This could have been better. It started off very well, but the government didn't back itself and therefore hasn't supported those small and medium-sized businesses to make sure that this piece of legislation, which at the very beginning of the process had wide and broad support, could be effective. And the government will congratulate itself for passing this piece of legislation, but it's only any good if it's effective. And it's not. It could have been better. And this government says it backs small and medium business, but in this case it hasn't. And I think that's another example of how this government has got out of touch with the very people it says it supports.